Helping Seniors Television, all about improving quality of life for seniors. If you're a senior, know a senior, or plan to be a senior, then this show is for you. It's all about helping you develop your own aging plan so you can age actively and with dignity. Helping Seniors Television from the Helping Seniors Network of information, education, and resources. Hello, I'm Kerry Fink with Helping Seniors Television. What a pleasure to have you with us today. I get the privilege of sitting in for our president and founder, Joe Steckler, and hosting today's edition of Helping Seniors TV. You're really going to get some good information out of today's television program. Our guest is Jessica Villanova with Enhanced Property Investments. And you already may be familiar with the wonderful work that they do helping people with properties that need a lot of help in terms of giving them a solution. But we thought we'd take a slightly different tack today and talk about the 14 steps that it would normally require to sell your home and just give you some insight. So you probably want to grab a notepad and start taking some notes, because I think you're going to get a lot of good information out of today's program. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here again.
So we're so honored to have you here. And we were talking about this. If you want to go on the Helping Seniors website, which is helpingseniorsofbrevard.org, helpingseniorsofbrevard.org, you'll find a lot of great resources. You can also, by the way, find our Helping Seniors YouTube channel. And all of our television programs are archived there, as well as being broadcast on television throughout Brevard County. But if you go there, you'll see some great programs that we've done, and we've had a real series of conversations actually with you already about how you guys help people with what other people might term as distressed properties. And in fact, how you guys actually work to end up improving neighborhoods through I guess I would call it the remodeling or the rehabilitation of homes. And at the same time, you're helping people who have a need to make a change fairly suddenly to accomplish those changes. Because as we've talked about before, right, you have seniors who all of a sudden find that they may not be able to safely return to home. Now things are in a whole different mode, and you've helped like lots of people in that situation, right?
Yes, unfortunately we do find that situations can change very quickly, and sometimes you just need a solution that works for that versus your traditional solutions.
But I love it when we were talking about this particular show, and you said, let's focus in on what the steps are that people see as buying and selling. And we were talking about before the show, a lot of times you'll see a commercial on TV and it says, oh, look how simple it is to sell your house. And it may be very misleading because it really isn't that simple, is it?
No, overall, I mean, there are a lot of factors to consider. And when you're going a traditional route, you know, there are multiple things you need to think about and to take care of. And at the end of the day, you know, yes, you want to make it as easy as possible, but you don't want to miss anything either. So, you know, when you're using a realtor or a more traditional setting to sell a property, there's check marks like anything that you need to take care of in order to do that.
And we talked about, and we'll get a little bit more into this as the show goes along, but we talked about one of the advantages that you guys present, and we had this whole conversation about how what you do is totally different than some of those TV shows about flippers who just, you know, I'm an investor, I'm going to buy your house cheap and sell it high. And the reason that you call it enhanced property investments is because of your commitment to doing the right thing on all sides of the table. Obviously, it's a business for you, but at the same time, you're really trying to find the best solution for the person that's needing to sell the home, and you still at the same time have an eye on improving the neighborhood and the value of homes in the neighborhood so that it reflects on that. And even before we jump into that, that kind of backs me up to a conversation we were having before the cameras were rolling. Because I asked you, how did you get into this business? And you were telling me that a little bit of your career, and I think it's fascinating. So if you wouldn't mind giving our viewers kind of how you got to where you're at with this.
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of a different path for sure. So I actually went to college for systems engineering, marine systems engineering at the Merchant Marine Academy up in New York. And that's where I grew up, you know, where all my background was. And when I graduated, I sailed in the Merchant Marine as an assistant engineer. And at that time, you know, you're out at sea, you kind of have a lot of time on your hands every once in a while, so I would read a lot. And there was a very well-known real estate investor, Robert Kiyosaki, which many people know for his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. which was more about the philosophy of changing your mindset from a traditional employee to an investor. And so on one of my sea tours, I read the book, and it made a lot of sense, and it hooked me. And so at the time I was traveling almost the majority of the year with work, but when I would come back, I started looking into rental properties and acquiring some small rentals where I was living at the time, which actually down in Palm Beach County. And just kind of grew from there. And then when we first moved into this area about 5 or 6 years ago, the opportunity just became available for looking into more of the remodeling side, versus the long-term holds. And the way it worked out, we did one property, and it hooked me again, because I just think it is a lot of fun. You're taking something that's kind of dejected and beat up, and something that people drive by every day, and they're like, oh man, I don't like that house. And then you're making it the house that people drive by, and they're like, oh, you know what? I really like that house. And it makes people feel good to live in that area. It makes you feel good to know that you improved that, and you contributed to that. And at the end of the day, it's our neighborhood too. So it's fun, it's exciting, and I don't know, every once in a while I'll drive past some of the houses we've worked on in the past, and it feels good to know, someone's living in there that used to just be something that was empty and that people didn't care about and would just never give a second look, and now someone's whole life and family is in there, and it's a neat concept.
And it was interesting because I said I would imagine through the process of working with rental properties, you really came across situations where maybe somebody didn't treat the house well, and now you were sort of back in the position of having to make it ready to re-rent or whatever you want to do next. And that probably gave you a lot of experience that is able to carry over to what you guys do today in enhanced property investments.
It definitely did. I think anytime you have a living situation between a renter or an owner, there's going to be wear and tear on a house, and usually in rental situations, unfortunately, you don't get that same sense of ownership from the tenants. So luckily, we never had too many ridiculously crazy issues, but we have bought houses from landlords who have gone through that, and they have a tenant who just takes a baseball bat and is not happy, and we've seen lots of holes in walls. We've seen people rip electrical wires out of the house because they're just so angry when they leave. And people do a lot of crazy things when they're in a bad situation, but luckily we're able to come in and again help that homeowner, because walking into a property you own and just realizing how much someone has destroyed it is kind of a gut-wrenching feeling.
It's funny. It reminds me of a story of someone I knew that had a rental home where they'd been through that. And so when they were surveying the damage to the home, they're calling the insurance company, and the insurance company said, well, no, that's what they call hard living. That's not really a covered. I thought, well, that's pretty hard living when you think about it. But you are able to help people with those kind of properties. But then the other side of it that we've talked about before is you help people, like I said, we started out the show talking about where the situation has changed living-wise, and all of a sudden it's not on somebody's preferred timeline. It's now there's a situation, and all these things have to happen within certain time windows, because maybe mom was discharged from a hospital and now it's not safe for her to be home alone, so resources from the house need to be applied to that situation. And that's where I understand you guys are really able to make such a difference for people, because you have that capacity to get involved and make a good situation out of what otherwise could be a really difficult one.
Right. One of our benefits is we can work on whatever the seller's timeline is. Usually that does involve it being very quick, because that is one of our basic benefits, right? We can get in there. Your traditional home buyer isn't going to look at the house and be closed in 2 weeks. We can often do it in as little as 2 weeks.
So that brings us really to the core of what we want to talk about today. Is what you really do is you flatten these steps that somebody has to go through to sell a home. And so when we sort of jokingly started, we said there's this research that you've done that says there's 14 steps to selling a home. Let's just try to quickly hit those one by one so that we can think together about the complexity of that, so that when it comes to your situation, you're going, these are the things that I need to think through, whether I'm going to go a traditional route and try to market my home, or whether I'm going to look at some option that might be presented that would make sense for me through an organization like Enhanced Property Investments. So let's hit with number one.
Sure, that's fine. And again, this is just a basic guide, but for a standard home sale, this is where you kind of have most of your points. So I'll just list them all first, and then we can kind of go through them. So number one, you have determine your goals. Number two, determine your home value. Number three, sign a listing agreement. Number four, prepare your home for sale. Number five, marketing your home. Number six, show your home. Number seven, receive offers and negotiate. Number eight, open escrow and order title. Number nine, schedule an appraiser. Number 10, go through buyer's due diligence. Number 11, negotiate requests for repairs. Number 12, release contingencies. Number 13, sign title and escrow documents. And number 14, close and celebrate, be happy.
And all those things just sound so simple to do, although it's a lot of them. And yet when you think about it, I'm thinking through personal experience of watching different people that we've known along the way. I've seen them get all the way down to step number 14, and then everything blows up at 14 and they're back to one, as we say in show business. You know, you have to start the whole process all over again. And I guess when we see all this electronic stuff that's now available to us on the internet, you know, we'll look up, it says my home is worth this many dollars, but nobody's ever been in to look at my home. And I understand it's trying to look at things generally, but probably in your experience, when somebody sits down with a real estate agent, it's probably an eye-opening experience, because what really happens with a house is not necessarily tied to what somebody might be seeing in an online program.
Sure, and unfortunately that is one of the things that most homeowners, it's not that they don't understand, it's just something that's never brought to their attention. You know, you look at the house next door and you say, well, that house to me looks the same as mine, right? But then you break it down a little bit and you say, well, my roof's 10 years older than theirs. Or just construction. They might have a frame house versus a block house, which some people put different values on. You know, they're just, you might have updated the entire inside of your house, or you know, there's just so many factors that people can't necessarily see right up front.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's part of what an agent or someone like us should at some point explain, because your traditional person just doesn't ever have that brought to their attention.
Right. So when you go back to some of these points and you get down to the one about signing a listing agreement, this is probably where you're asking the agent to maybe, I guess it's called pulling comps, so somebody can start to say, well, this is probably really what your house is valued at in today's marketplace. But even the fact of how do you figure out that, all those processes you have to figure out, who would you trust to list it? Are they going to tell you what they think you want to hear, or are they going to tell you what the reality might be? So there's a lot of factors, even if you just drill down into the listing agreement.
Sure, and again, that is part of the real estate agent's job, obviously, right? To put those numbers together for a seller. But at the end of the day, the agent isn't buying the house themselves, right? They're not the ones who are saying, I'm saying it's worth $100,000, I'm going to put $100,000 in your pocket. They're basically saying, I say it's worth $100,000, I'm going to try to get you $100,000. That doesn't mean at the end of the day they will or can, or that's how it'll shake out. So yes, the agent is going to try and promise what they can. You know, they can't feasibly know in 6 months how much exactly it's going to sell for. So, not that it's a disbenefit, but again, it's not something a definite, right? It's, when we are putting an offer together, it's a definite. It's hey, this is the exact number. You know, I promise you, this is what the number is going to be. So, just a little different in any scenario, whether we're the buyer or someone else is. When you have an actual purchase agreement versus a listing agreement, that's where the numbers. It's a solid number, or it's we're going to hope to get this number.
Right. And that's another question, because usually there's a lot of pressure these days. You see stuff, oh, it's so easy, you just go on the internet and you can sell your house on the internet, and you don't have to pay all those expensive fees and commissions and things like that. And yet the reality is, when you stop and think about it, what goes into those commissions and fees is all those marketing dollars. Somebody has to put together, like you said, photos or different things that are connected to putting your home on the market so that people will find it and do well with it.
Sure. And I mean, even realtors in general, they're paying annual dues and things just to hold their license. Yes, they're paying for marketing and things like that. I mean, at the end of the day, their knowledge of the market essentially will get you a better price for your property because that is their job. And not only that, but the fact that there is an entire group of agents that they are sharing your property with. I mean, you put your house on the internet, you don't know how many people are looking at it.
Right.
You don't know where exactly it's getting out there. You put a sign in your front yard, how many people are driving past your house? But when you're at the point of listing with an agent, it's automatically going out. I believe in Brevard County, there's about 4,000 real estate agents.
Wow.
So it's going out to 4,000 people, and those people each have multiple buyers. So, it's getting out to thousands and thousands of people on a platform that it's meant to.
And isn't that part of the discussion too, is like, okay, if you put it out there as a for sale by owner or something like that, real estate people or people who are professional in real estate, isn't there something to that if you put a home out on the market and it's not really ready for prime time, doesn't that ultimately hurt your chance of selling it?
It usually does. I mean, at the end of the day, the longer you see a house sit on the market, it's just natural to look at it and say, okay, what's wrong with it?
Right.
If your average home is selling 45 to 60 days, which is standard for most of Brevard, then, if it's been on 90 days, what's wrong?
People are asking,
why don't,
whether it's fair or not, they're going to say, well,
Right.
maybe there's something up with it.
Is it the price? Are they not getting offers? Or is there something
Right.
physically wrong where people are walking away? You don't know, but you start to assume that.
So, and then as the process goes along, now the buyer brings in somebody who says, oh, this could be right for us. But then obviously they're going to do, I think it was a step you were talking about called due diligence. Walk us through a little bit what that means from a real estate perspective.
Sure, and there's actually a couple of steps that kind of fall under that. So they were talking about the title work, the appraisal even, the due diligence, and the repair requests, that sort of thing. So traditionally, when someone's buying a house, they're going to do a home inspection. Most of these things, it's for information purposes for the buyer, but ultimately it's for purposes of the lender who's going to require these things because they have guidelines of what they can do.
Sure.
So a lot of times it comes down to lending and insurance.
Right.
So they're pushing that burden to the buyer to say, hey, if we don't approve of the property, it doesn't matter if you want it or you like it. At the end of the day, you can't buy it if we say no.
Right.
So a lot of that falls into that category where they want to see the inspections, certain items on it. If you're getting into things like FHA programs or VA programs, they're even more stringent on some of those. Ideally, everyone would just find a cash buyer who said, I'll pay you whatever you want and I'll close and we'll be done. But your traditional buyer really isn't usually that type. So when you have these third parties, they're the ones setting the guidelines. So that falls into that whole period of figuring those things out. And that's when even things like title, we were talking about how they can have title issues. And that's when all of those things come up and those can change timelines. Usually those don't necessarily cost money, but it's more time and effort, whether or not the title can be cleared, how they have to do it, finding all those fun things to kind of clear up before you can even actually process a sale.
We were talking about that, particularly sometimes if something comes up, like let's call it an estate sale or there's a situation like that, and then people get into the property and they're starting to figure out what's going on with it, and then they discover all these things. Like I think you were telling a story where you literally had somebody had to drive all the way to Georgia to rectify something that hadn't been done right, like years in the past.
Right, so that was a specific property. One of the sellers about 20 years ago, I want to say, didn't use realtors or professionals when they were doing their sale. And it's perfectly legal. I mean, you can do your own documents. Like you said, you can list your own house for sale. You can sign your own documents and have them recorded. But there was one piece of paper they just didn't sign and record the right way. And it didn't get caught until, they were trying to sell it again. So they had to go through all the title. And yeah, they ended up tracking this guy down, and he was up in Georgia. They had to drive out in the middle of nowhere to find him to get him to sign this paper so they could record it and clear the title. And it was a long process, a lot of work.
It's funny. It makes me think of a comment I just heard this morning from one of the elder law attorneys who's connected with helping seniors, and she said she gets more business from people who've gone to like one of those services that you can get online. They'll try to do their own paperwork, and then they come in and find out how complicated it is. And she actually mentioned a story of a lady who was really trying to help her father, and it was an $800,000 item that they were trying to work through. And because the way they had completed this on the online form, it wasn't being tracked correctly at all. And so when fortunately the father had come in and said, well, let's have her look over this, and they were able to get that straightened out. But could you imagine, that's not a small boo-boo. And when you're talking about the value of somebody's home, that one tiny boo-boo like that could really derail everything.
Sure. Well, at that point, it can stop the entire process. It's not even just about money. If they can't clear title, it might just be a hard no. Or, you know, if they can't get past inspection issues, it's just a no. And it's, you know, it's really, really frustrating for most people. I mean, we've been on that end as well. We've been on the selling end, you know, because usually once we enhance our properties, we are reselling them. And we had a deal just a couple of months ago. We were selling down to the last day before closing. Everything was fine. We went through all the lending, all the appraisals, all the inspections. Everything worked out well. And then this gentleman, he was older, and he had an ex-wife who they weren't finalized with their divorce.
All the things, yeah.
And her name wasn't even on any of the house or the paperwork. But all she had to do was sign a paper to say that she understood he was going to sell the house or buy the house, because he was our buyer.
And that threw it into
all
overload.
She had to do, and she would not do it.
Wow.
And even though he had the lending, he had the cash, he had what he needed to close, we went through everything already. We were the day before closing, and she would not sign the paperwork. And so he couldn't buy the house.
See, and that brings up the point that I wanted to ask you about, because even once you've jumped through every one of these 13 hoops to get you down to that 14th one, which is the actual closing, that's still another finish line you've got to get across, right?
Right, it is. You know, so many people don't realize how many things can come up in even your standard 30 to 45-day process, just a lot of hiccups.
Now, if somebody, having thought through these 14 steps to selling your home, says, well, I still think it might be worthwhile for me to try what I would call a traditional process, how do you recommend to somebody, well, this is how you find the right agent, this is how you might go about working through these 14 steps?
Right. Well, obviously, doing a little research beforehand is always a good thing. When it comes to finding an agent, call my husband. No.
That's right, because he is a real estate agent. That's in your purview as well.
He is, but in all honesty, like anything, how do you find a doctor? How do you find, number one, referrals are a great way. And even in the respect of, if you're selling your single-family house and you get referred to a realtor who sells condos on the beach, maybe say, okay, they might not understand single-family houses as much, you know,
point.
even to that point. But like anyone, you should always just ask a couple of questions. How long have they been doing it? What is their specialty? You know, are they full-time or not? Like I said, there are just about 4,000 realtors in Brevard. I don't know exactly what the percentage of actual full-time ones are, but you do have a lot of people who are kind of supplementing income by doing it on the side. You know, so not that there's any discredit to that, but if you want someone with the full experience, like we were saying, it's worth paying a realtor who's giving you that experience and their knowledge in order to get you more for your property and that kind of thing.
So how might a seller try to discern between somebody who's telling them, how would I say it? You're leaning towards telling me what I want to hear my property is worth, versus then kind of like just being straight with me, because I'm sure it's not impossible to find somebody who might be eagerly optimistic.
It goes both ways. You know, sometimes no matter how honest you are, and we find that too, no matter how honest you are with a seller, they are stuck with either a number or a scenario that just is what they want, no matter how much you tell them or show them proof one way or another. But at the end of the day, yeah, the realtor should be able to show you some actual facts, things in writing to say, hey, you know, these 3 houses in this area, exactly the same as yours. This is what they sold for. That's what we're basing this off of. You know, I'm not pulling an apartment from 3 counties over and saying, oh yeah, they got that. We'll get this. You know, it's
right. So we're really just down to the last couple of minutes in the show, and it's really been an interesting tour of this. I do want to talk for a minute about enhanced property investments because you guys really simplify. I think you said we're able to get it down to like a handful of steps instead of these 14 steps. And the thing that I guess viewers are good to keep in mind is that when you compact all that, see, all those, we all say it's not what you would gross on the sale of your house, it's what you would get after you've been through all those 14 steps and you get a net settlement. And then when you can compare those apples to apples, oftentimes maybe it makes just as much sense to sit down and have that conversation with you.
Sure, because a lot of times people don't look at the whole picture, you know? So even, I would say for the 14 steps in general, you're talking about a 6-month process by the time you're contacting the realtor, finding the realtor, preparing your house. Most people's houses aren't exactly set for somebody to walk through the minute, you know, that you want to list. And then just depending on your scenario also. So there's a lot of prep that goes into it. Then of course, the first day it's on the market, somebody usually is not there with contract in hand saying, okay, let's do this. I want it right now. That would be ideal. So yeah, number one, so even just for how long it takes to hold a house for 6 months, you're talking 6 mortgage payments, 6 utility bills of every type. You know, there's taxes, insurance, it all adds up. So, you know, you might be looking at, like you said, a different gross number at the top, but when it comes down to it, you have other things to factor in, and then just your time and your situation. And
that's what makes what you guys do is so effective. And obviously, if they give you a call, there's no cost to that. They can sit down, take a look at the numbers, and then. But it's a great place to have that information. How do we get in touch with you?
Well, you can either call us. Our direct number is 321-351-3222. If not, you can go on our website also, enhancedpropertyinvestments.com. That's ENHANCED, Property Investments with an S at the end.com.
Okay, and the phone number one more time.
321-351-3222.
Well, thanks, Jessica, for being on the show and giving us some good insight into real estate. And for many people, that's a big part of the retirement plan, so let's get this part right. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Kerry Fink. On behalf of Joe Steckler, thanks for joining us for Helping Seniors TV.
Joe Steckler, thank you for joining our program today. I'd like to remind you that our senior information line is available to you at 321-473-7770. There you can get help and direction that could be helpful for your specific situation or circumstances. The work of helping seniors is very important, but we can't do it alone. That is why our sponsors here in Brevard County are so important. I'd like to thank our many area sponsors, businesses and medical providers who support the mission of helping seniors that help us carry the cost of our media efforts. If you'd like to join us either as a business partner or simply donate as an individual, we would welcome your call at 321-473-7770. You are always welcome to visit our website at www.helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. Thanks so much for your help. It does make a difference.